Do you want your business to grow faster? Are you open to new and out-of-the-box ways to drive revenues and increase value? How do you imagine the most successful entrepreneurs and business leaders double, triple, or expand their businesses tenfold or more? The answer is Deals. This is a weekly podcast featuring conversations with business owners, executives, and leaders as we reveal behind-the-scenes details that give you, our listeners, the confidence to pursue your own deal-driven growth. On this show, we discuss a huge variety of deals, everything from large, complex mergers and acquisitions, capital raising, joint ventures, strategic alliances, real estate, affiliate and sponsorship deals, franchising, and more. My name is Corey Kupfer, and I've been supporting deal-driven growth for businesses for over 35 years as a successful entrepreneur, professional negotiator, and attorney. My goal is to help you strategize, plan for, find, and complete deals that will help your company grow faster. Welcome to the Deal Quest podcast. Let's get started. Zachary Beach went from a bartender to a real estate expert, coach, and 3 times best-selling co-author of Real Estate on Your Own Terms, The New Rules for Real Estate Investing, and Sell with Authority for Real Estate Investors. He's the CEO of Smart Real Estate Coach, a partner in multiple 7-figure businesses, and the co-host of Smart Real Estate Coach and Not Just a Transaction podcasts. At the age of 25, he decided to leave the world of bartending and personal training and jump into the family business. It was one of the first big risks he took in his life, as nothing was guaranteed. Plus, he knew absolutely nothing about real estate, though through hard work, in-house training, and implementation, Zach has now completed or advised over 1,000 deals. And on top of that, he leads and mentors students around the country on how to buy and sell property, just like his family still does. And listen, I am so excited to have Zach on the podcast. I mean, I want to hear about that transition and, why you got into it. I want to hear about the deals. I want to hear about the way you're training people. But before we do any of that, I want to take you back to when you were a little kid growing up, maybe 8, 10, 12 years old. What did you want to be? Because clearly it wasn't a real estate professional, because I don't think, at least, because you weren't even doing that, based upon your bio. So what was it when you were younger?
Oh, well, Corey, I'm excited to be on here, and I appreciate it. Yeah, there's been a lot of transitions that I've gone through my life, but if I went back to when I was like 8 to 10, I thought I was actually going to be a professional football player. I mean, I loved football, but what I figured out really quickly was that I was only going to be like 5'8" and a half. So that pretty much went out the window. So the second tier, though, as I thought I was going to be a sports agent. I went as far as I was going to go to school in New York City to become that. But unfortunately, I was not a very good student growing up. So a lot of my decisions were made for me. So I ended up going to, went to college, got that all done, and then did what every good college degree, we do is we go become bartenders. So I did that for a while until I got burnt out there. And luckily, real estate found me, which is really cool.
I love that. It's amazing how many of us were, had these illusions or delusions about being professional athletes. For me, it was basketball, and it was the same thing, 5'8", and change. And like, let's say respectable Brooklyn schoolyard ball player is about I was on the traveling team, the all-star team of my Jewish league basketball. So, that was the height of my basketball career was, making the all-star team, the traveling team for my Jewish league.
But Corey, as you would agree, I'm sure. I mean, the sports, I didn't learn anything. Like, I guess I learned some things in school, but I learned it all on the sports field, and I can still relate a majority of that today. Luckily enough, I was able to be on some pretty good teams growing up, middle school and then high school. We ended up winning one of the state championships in football, and I was lucky enough to do it. I wasn't the best athlete, but I was able to be named captain, which really that taught me a lot. It's not that it was cool to be a captain. What it taught me was I wasn't the athletic leader on the team. We had some amazing people. We had ones that went D1. We had my middle linebacker ended up going to the NFL. Didn't have a long career, but he went.
Yep.
And I was one of those captains that I had to lead the example of how the vision and the purpose of this team and how we were going to sacrifice for each other in order to actually make this thing happen. So I didn't learn it much in school, but the football field or the baseball field, that's where I learned everything that I could even apply to today, especially building teams and running companies now.
Yeah, and if you think about it, I mean, it's almost become cliche, but I think people are not really in the entrepreneurial world, they don't understand that. And that is that those of us who are those kind of visionaries and entrepreneurs, if we are smart, we are not the best person on our team at anything other than creating the vision and being, the leader there. Like in terms of any kind of execution, implementation, whether, similar to being the best lineman or the best running back or the best quarterback, right? Whatever, on a football team, we are none of those things in our business. Like everything that gets executed in our business is done better by somebody else than we can do it personally if we're smart, at least in my mind.
Oh, for sure. I definitely fall into that category. I'm sure that there are some CEOs or visionaries that are good integrators, right? And they got to bring in a visionary, but when I have a great integrator, when we have good operators, I mean, the company flies because it's our job to build the team, set the vision, and make sure we have the resources to get there. And, I've learned that the hard way over the last couple of years, right? Trying to do too much of it. Like when I first was going through Smart Real Estate Coach and finding my footing, I wasn't just buying real estate. We were growing this coaching company at the same time. I got placed in a COO position. And, I think some of it was just because I was willing to take on basically any of the work needed, but I found out really quickly that I was not COO material, even though I held it down, but it took every ounce of willpower because if you look at my charts, like I am not a follow-up person. I'm the set the vision, have somebody else follow up. And once I was able to kind of get back into that position, that's when, I started to realize I was aligning myself with what, the universe truly wanted me to be doing right now.
100%. Love that. So one other question looking back, what was your first deal of any type? I don't know if it was an early real estate deal or there's something, before that. Anything you consider a deal?
Well, if I went back to when I was like 8, the first transaction I ever did was so I used to live next to a golf course. Okay. And actually my real estate investment company is named after it. It's called Watch Street because at the top of Watch Street, there was all this tall grass. I believe it was like the 7th tee. And I used to go pick out golf balls from the tall grass because none of the golfers wanted to do it. And I used to sell golf balls 3 for $1. Yeah. I know, absolutely undercut myself when it came to that because now you go to a golf course, but you can't buy 3 golf balls for less than $10, $20 at this point. But that was my first transaction. That was the first time that I was actually able to see like my work of literally picking up balls and then selling it to somebody and getting $1 for that. If I looked at my real estate career, though, I mean, real estate, I did my first deal. It took me roughly 6 months to get to it. I was learning everything. And what I mean is like when I joined my father-in-law, actually, who's in real estate for like 20-something years previously, and my brother-in-law was also working with him as well. When I came over, it was like, we get to eat what we kill. So it wasn't like I got some cushy job where I got a salary. I literally had to be cold calling people as my first part of real estate investing. So I had to learn like a whole skill set on top of like being able to self-manage. And once I was able to get my first deal, it was what's known as a subject to deal, which is, so we buy everything creative financing is really like kind of the umbrella. And a subject to deal simply means like, I go buy the house, I get title, but the seller's loan stays in place. Okay. Because we keep it on. So we just make payments on the seller's behalf. So that continues to be attached to the seller. So I was able to buy this property for just closing costs. Your buy was like $180,000 property. The seller was going through a divorce. He literally had no money to be able to make the next mortgage payment. So we acquired it. And then what we do is we sell all of our properties, especially our single families, on rent to own, which is like 80% of the market out there that can't walk into a bank and get a loan. Right. So we sold it to them. That transaction had some ups and downs. We had to deal with some lead. We had a tenant buyer that wasn't perfect. So the deal kind of took as many sideways aspects as you could. We were a first deal. But luckily, I was surrounded by a good group of people and some strong leaders, and we were able to execute it. I think it ended up being like a $70,000 deal in total. And that's really what broke me into this real estate industry.
Yeah, so interesting. So what had you, like that move, all right, so you bartending, your personal training, whatever, obviously, you do have, it's funny when I speak with folks about their entrepreneurial journey, some of them have entrepreneurial family members, right? They have examples. I was somebody who, everybody in my family that I was close to or knew worked for somebody their entire life. So like I had no entrepreneurial models, but somehow I always had an entrepreneurial bone, right? Like I was running business, hiring my friends when I was 15, right? So like I have no idea where it came from. Whereas other folks like, yeah, my parents, my grandparents, whatever, they all, So you obviously, you said your father-in-law, so you didn't have that in your life until you met your wife. Like what was it did you always have a desire to be an entrepreneur? Was it, did it sort of kick in with the real estate stuff? Like talk to me about that journey. What had you, say, bartending and personal training is not going to be the rest of my life?
Yeah. Before I understood what the word entrepreneur meant, what I always just thought was I didn't want to work for anybody else because Like, and I realized that pretty soon, like early in my life when I went to school, and I was always like the kid that got in trouble because everybody was telling me what to do. And I, for some innate reason, I just didn't want to do what everybody else was telling me to do. So what I thought myself was kind of unemployable.
Yeah.
See, I didn't come from an entrepreneur. Actually, my dad was extremely like blue collar, actually in and out of work, actually in and out of my life. And my mom was, so I really grew up like a single mom. She was like a cashier or middle management. So we had zero, like even like financial, not only financial stability, but no financial like ideas or literacy. Yeah. So I just was looking for something that was going to get me out of the current like cycle that my family was in. And I started to like see people that were successful, and a lot of them were either in two boats. It was either like my uncle was really successful. He was a VP of a company called Nipro Plastics out of Massachusetts. So, but he worked the corporate ladder, and he was actually in China half of his life. So, because he had to go run those warehouses. So like that model. And I was like, I don't know if I'm the guy that wants to do that, but there's gonna be a better way. So then I started to see other models, and I actually met my wife in 6th grade. So we've been dating on and off for a very long time. So then I saw my father-in-law, Chris, and like he was always in real estate or owned a business. And so I started to get exposed to that at a young age, not just from him, but from others. And when I started to realize, I was like, oh, well, that seems more of like what makes sense for me. Now, what I come to realize later on in life is entrepreneurship is not all like the cars and the nice house and going on vacations. It actually is sleepless nights and, challenges, making payroll, like handling everybody, being somebody's therapist, right? It was like, it's everything. Yeah. But what I soon, like, as I went through entrepreneurship, I started to fall in love with it, like the good and the bad, because I would rather be taking a risk on myself and my team than working for somebody else and doing something I didn't want to do just to make money. So again, I don't think it was like I knew what entrepreneurship was. I just had an innate ability to not do everything else that, the normal bat was.
Love that. It's so interesting is, you said you weren't a great student, that kind of stuff. And, there is this classic that's become a thing, which is largely true, that often the A students end up working for the C students, right? The funny part is like, I actually was, well, so it's funny for me because I was a quote unquote A student, but not a typical A student. Like in high school, I just got by, right? And I did fine because I spent half of my senior year at McDonald's in high school. Like, I didn't go to classes. Like I was not a good student. What I was a good test taker. Right. So I did well grade wise, but not because I was a good student, just because, and I've always said test taking is maybe somewhat correlated, but not to, not correlated to intelligence. I knew some really smart people who didn't do well, on tests. And then I had a bit of a motivation because when I went to college, the funny part was that, most of my friends, I grew up in Brooklyn, a lower middle class family, right? So the kids who either didn't go to college or they went to Brooklyn College, like that was what you did. I never even thought about going away to school. Oddly, usually it's the other way around. My parents were like, do you want to go away? And I don't know if they were trying to get rid of me. Jokingly, I've had a great relationship with them over the years. My dad's gone. But the point is, I think they saw something that might be good for me to get me out of the environment. So it was really because of them. And I went to Stony Brook State School. But my parents, because even at state school tuition, it was a lot of money for them. Later in life, they became more comfortable. But at that time, and most of my life, they were, we weren't poor, but they were paycheck to paycheck, right? So in any case, they were the ones who inspired that. But they said to me, if you don't get really good grades, you're coming back right home and going to Brooklyn College. And, after my first semester out at Stony Brook and loving like being on my own and being away, whatever, I'm like, I don't want to lose this. So, I better figure out how to get good grades, and I definitely did more work than I did in high school, but I still was not a great student. Like I just had this innate ability to do well on tests, which served me really, really well, like even all the way through law school. So it's funny because I am quote unquote the A student, but I'm not like, I'm really a C student in terms of how I approach things with an A student ability to get test scores, right? So it's funny.
What you realize is, Corey, is, most entrepreneurs are either they first start running away from something, right? And then eventually we learn to run towards something. So just like your example, it's like, well, I'm running away from Brooklyn College. There's no way I'm going to Brooklyn College, right? So same, like I ended up making it into college, and that was just because I was just trying to get out of my hometown. So I did enough eventually to get out. So I was just running away from something. But like as my journey continued into entrepreneurship, I started running towards a goal, started running towards a vision.
Yes.
And that's when things changed. And it wasn't like that at the beginning, like when I made the transition from bartender into real estate investor, I was running away from bartending. I was just like, I was so burnt out. I was just trying to get away from it. So I was like, how do I get the next deal and get the next deal? Not because I saw like this huge future. I just saw I was a way out of where I was, and I figured I would figure it out later.
Yeah.
But then when we started building like a real estate business, we started building Smart Real Estate Coach, and now we're doing with the real estate roll up. It's like, this is where like you're running towards a vision, which gets you. Now I'm not just staying up late at night because I got to make payroll and you know, I got enough stress going on. But now I'm like excited thinking about like what's next.
Yeah, what are you going to build? What are you going to create? What an opportunity? How many more people can you impact and serve? Right, that's when it becomes. Yeah, totally. So let's talk about that a little bit. So take us through the journey, and I want to like get into all these different things you mentioned that you're doing now. So you do your first deal, right? Yeah. Some ups and downs with issues, but you make some money. Like, where does it evolve from there?
Yeah, it's a great question. So what I noticed right away when I went in and I started working with my father-in-law and brother-in-law was it was very old school. Like he came from being a broker and like a realtor, so everything was always just like phone work and grinding, which totally makes sense to me. And we still use that a lot in our real estate business. But there's no systems, processes. We still have paper everywhere. So what I came in is I really developed the entire front end of the business. So I used my visionary work to be able to like, all right, well, now let's create systems and processes around here so we can grow and scale it. And we did that, and eventually we did on the back end. And what that eventually led to kind of like the model in which we sell to our students now and the people we do real estate deals with across the country. And that's where the evolution came, because we went from doing a couple deals a month to then we started doing like 4 to 10 deals a month. And these are like building relationships with sellers and buyers, because we're buying real estate deals with no cash, no credit, no banks involved. So that's really solving a problem and getting deep. So we have to really build that out, and we started really capitalizing on that. And then we started building out the entire back end and selling to rent to own buyers. And then what happened was there was this moment in time where we were building Smart Real Estate Coach and our real estate business at the same time. And eventually, like, there was a tipping point where it was like, all right, well, we either just keep really getting after real estate deals, or we got to make a decision. Like, do we believe Smart Real Estate Coach is something that we can grow and scale? So we started, I would say, weaning off of real estate deals. We actually just started putting it more of like consistency versus growth and scale. And then we really leaned into Smart Real Estate Coach, which I'm glad we did. We're now 12 years into, this journey. And then really what we've been able to do is now drastically impact people all across the country. And we really able to create this model too, which is different than most, which is like, yes, it's a coaching company, so people come and pay for coaching, but we also have a rev share component with the real estate transactions that we do.
Yeah.
So now we said, look, it's actually a combination of both deals. We're kind of a real estate investment company disguised as a coaching company.
Yeah.
Because then when a new student comes in and we help them do deals, like we're involved in real estate transactions in like 80 plus markets all across the country. We have boots on the ground now because they're building and scaling their business. So it became a really cool model that allowed us to eventually really do both. And then we're able to really build that out where I no longer coach anymore. Now my father-in-law does like top tier coaching, but we have 6 now really strong coaches that handle our community members, and we're building out the front end, like marketing and sales. So it's been really cool to see all that evolve from going from doing everything to now like actually being able to lead the company.
I love it. So let's talk about these folks that come in and do the coaching programs, or whatever. And listen, no matter how great your program is, successful you are, right? You're going to have people that are successful in it and people who aren't, right? And because it's, no matter how great information is, people still have to do the work. They still have to figure it out. Mistakes still happen, whatever. Nothing's perfect. So what is it? And also there are a lot of real estate coaching programs, companies out there, et cetera, right? People get pitched all the time. And some of them, frankly, people have done really well. And some of them, have gotten a bad reputation in certain things. So a few questions on that. Like, who's the avatar that people come to your program? What makes them successful versus the ones that are not? And then I'll get to what distinguishes you from, the other coaching program.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So we tend to do best with, if I give like an age range, right? 40 to like 55, which the reason why that's important, I even bring that up, is because number one, you have to have enough financial stability to be able to even get into the program.
Yes.
Where we would consider ourselves high ticket.
Yep.
And then secondly, you have to have enough pain to want to go build a business, because actually a majority of the people we work with tend to be W-2 employees, right? They've done all the right things. They've actually have some financial success, but they're either not where they want to be financially, or they're not where they are time-wise, freedom-wise. Like, they've kind of done everything right, but they find themselves like in a position where they're not either happy, or they don't have the resources, or they don't have the time with the family that they're hoping for. So now they're looking for a model that they can build something around. So like that could be like, it could be real estate, it could be online now, right? Drop shipping, all the, like there's so many entrepreneurial or business ops now, right? Yep. So opportunities. But what we've done is we've shown them how to build a real estate model, which allows them to capture a couple different things, which is they actually get the real estate, which most people either do a business opportunity and then build real estate for tax purposes, right? So, and it's a system. So I would say not only on top of that person, but they have to have the correct mindset when they come in, or they have to be open-minded, because everything that got them to where they are is where they are, right? So they need to make a drastic, or what we call a transformation. So our mission here at Smart Real Estate Coach is to be known as the community that transforms dedicated people into smart investors. So they have to be dedicated. They have to be willing to put in the work. Like, we built the system, but they still have to go implement it. Right. We even oversee them and actually help them execute the deals, but they still need to run the bus. So dedication's a big thing, willing to transform, because there's so much that comes into it. If you go from being a W-2 employee to now a business owner, there are just so many skill sets and or mindset components that come into play that can stop you when it comes to being successful. So 40 years old, higher income bracket means 75 to 250K, right? So they have enough money to be able to do it, but they also have enough pain to be able to want to transform. And then, of course, if you're willing to learn, dedication, and the biggest thing is communication. So if you are not great at communicating, then you'll be willing to learn how to communicate, because creative financing is just as much a skill set as is an investment strategy. It's really about understanding somebody's problem, right? And then being able to solve it with the tools that we have available. And if you can use those tools and solve that problem, well, then that's how you get the no money down deals, right? So those are some components when it comes to the people that are find success.
Right. What are some of the biggest mistakes people make when they're investing in real estate using even these methodologies, but if they don't do it right? Whether it's the fact that they're not working with you, or they don't follow your system, or whatever, right?
No, if I kind of just went down the line, like one of the major mistakes people make is they think learning or knowledge is going to solve their problem. And especially with today's society, with shiny object and so many YouTube videos, right, out there, podcasts, you name it, nobody implements anything nowadays. So that's the problem. So it's implementation that's the biggest challenge. And that's really what we tend to focus on when it comes to this, is because you can know everything in the world, but if you're not implementing, like, let me give you an example. We just did a real estate transaction with a woman. Her name is Channing. She's up in Seattle, Washington, which is, people looked at that area, they would say a lot of high-end homes. It's a blue state, so probably not good tenant laws, right? And she didn't have a lot of real estate experience. She did a little bit of development. So that would stop 99% of people from like saying, I'm going to invest in real estate. But instead, this strong, passionate woman, she ends up going to get a real estate deal. She walked me through it the other day on our YouTube channel, and she didn't have her website set up. And she didn't know all of her scripts. She didn't know everything. But what she did was she took action on the things that we told her to take action on, and was able to get a property under contract in a very short period of time, and then sell it and end up with I think it was like a $35,000 check within 30 days. So that's what I mean by like the speed of implementation is the biggest thing when it comes to that. So learning isn't obviously doing things alone, whether it's us or somebody else, is another mistake, because your self-confidence is typically what stops people from investing in real estate deals or any business. Because if they believe they don't have the answers and that they're not going to be successful, or they're hesitant, right, when it comes to these types of things, then they're never going to actually go get a real estate deal, and then they're going to be frustrated, and they're going to never do it.
Yeah.
Then it's going to keep going through that cycle. And then I would say the last biggest thing is, most people build a business around one specific strategy. And I think it's a mistake, even though most people say master a strategy, go an inch deep and an inch deep, mile wide. But the truth is, like, I think it's the opposite of real estate transactions, because I think when you're dealing with people, which is really what real estate is, right? We work in a people business. We just happen to buy real estate.
Yes.
So when you're working with that scenario, people have so many different problems or challenges. And if you have one specific tool, like, for example, let's say you're a wholesaler, which means that you got to buy a property at like 60 cents on the dollar to sell it to somebody else. Well, you only have one tool to solve the problem. So anytime anybody like has a property that's more than 60 cents on the dollar, you're not going to buy. So you spend so much time, effort, marketing, dollars, everything in order to basically throw away 99% of your leads. But if you're somebody who's equipped with multiple strategies, like we do seller financing, subject to, lease purchases, we do some assignments. So what we're able to do is identify the seller's problem and then know from like a decision tree kind of, right, which problem is solved by which tool. And if you can do that, then all of a sudden now you don't throw away 99% of your leads, you throw away 70%, right? Or 60% because, you know, it doesn't fit. So those are some like really common mistakes that we see. But at the end of the day, the number one thing is implementation. If people don't implement, then they're never going to find success and they're never going to get momentum. And momentum is what generates everything.
Let's take a break from the show for a minute so I can tell you about an incredible resource my team and I have put together for you. Secrets of Deal-Driven Growth, Creative Ways to Grow Your Business Even in Challenging Times, is a powerful ebook that helps you take DealQuest podcast episodes and apply them to your own life and business. This is the ideal tool for anyone looking for creative ways to grow as deal makers, and you can get yours now. It's as easy as heading to coreycupford.com/workbook and downloading your copy. While you're there, you can also consider joining our dynamic deal-driven community of founders, experts, small business owners, and entrepreneurs. Now back for the show. I love that. I mean, going in reverse order, you know, this conversation of sort of, you know, having different tools in the toolbox or different structures or whatever. I mean, it's funny. It comes up in our work a lot, right? As attorneys, you know, sometimes that, you know, we do much more on the corporate deal side, you know, than we do, you know, and we do some real estate stuff, certainly. And I have my own real estate investment funds and done my own real estate investment and raise money from other people. So I'm familiar with it. But, you know, it's like sometimes I remember one time I had a client come in to me and say, hey, Corey, I want to sell my business. I want to do it as a reverse triangular merger. And I'm like, okay, hang on a second, right? We've done those, but like, what? Well, my friend did it that way, and he saved a lot of taxes. Okay, it's like, hey, what is the problem? What are we trying to solve, right? Where are we trying to get to? Okay, now let's look at the tool, the structure, the frame, whatever it is that fits, you know, that will get us there, right? And to get locked into only one way of doing it. Now, listen, I do believe, and you alluded to this, right? There's also the other, people go to extreme where they do 100 different deals and they're all done differently. That's not good either, right? You need to have, like, if you can have options, you want them to be somewhat limited because you want to get, you want to have a method and be able to scale it and do it consistently and not have to, recreate the wheel every time. So there's some balance in between. So, which is really what you were saying, which I love. And then the second one you said was the mindset piece. And anybody who listens to this podcast knows I'm huge on mindset, right? Unless we shift that mindset, whether it's around risk, whether it's around being, in real action, whether it's, around your self-identity, as somebody who's a W-2 employee, whatever it is, right? Like, I mean, I agree with you that practically the implementation piece is the biggest piece, but it's almost like I could make definitely an argument that the mindset's the biggest piece, not in terms of the amount of work, but it's the initial thing. Because if you don't shift that mindset, if you don't have that transformation you were talking about, right, then you're not going to implement because you're just going to be in that wrong mindset. And then on the execution piece, I mean, I am so aligned with you. I mean, I remember, this comes up in the entrepreneurial world as well. Like you hear all these people talk about, oh, I had that idea years ago before whatever, right? And it's funny, I started doing an article for publication many, many years ago. And then for a reason, they shifted. They wanted something different. But the article was going to be titled, "You Have a Great Idea and I Don't Care," right? And really what it was is not that, but there's a million great ideas and 98% of the people don't execute on them, right? So it's like, okay, great. You had the idea for Uber or whatever it was before. I'm not that impressed, right? Like you didn't do anything to make it happen, right? So, it's...
Oh, I've had many of those ideas. And my wife was like, hey, didn't you think of that like a couple years ago? I'm like, yeah, but I did. But I didn't have the balls to do it at the time, right? Or I didn't feel as though it was a priority. So yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. At the end of the day, yes, mindset, for a lack of a better word, is the biggest thing. Every time that we have our event, I always had people at the very beginning, I have them write out, I am a real estate investor, right? Because I'm like, your identity is going to determine your actions, your behaviors, your beliefs. So when you walked in this room, you probably were a nurse or you probably were a stay-at-home mom, or you probably were a manager or whatever it was. But from here on out, if you truly want to be investing in real estate, you now have to be, I am a real estate investor. So that way you act like one, talk like one, hang out with them, look for resources, network, just like a real estate investor would. So eventually, the be do have model.
Yep.
Eventually, you'll have what you set out to do.
Yeah. All right. I'll share one other parallel thing, and then I want to jump into more detail about what you do and, how your system works and that kind of stuff. But I remember, back in the day, so I was never a runner, right? Even when I was younger and thinner, whatever, I'm built stocky. So I was always a strong cyclist, right? Like I'm built like I've got strong legs. But I started running to do duathlons, right? To do run bike runs, right? Never get to swimming, so never got to tries. And forever ago, I've been with my wife now for 26 years. I was dating a woman who was a marathoner, right? She had run 14 marathons, like 7 New York Cities, Pikes Peak, Boston. Like she was telling me, you run for the duathlons, you should do a marathon. You should do the Extreme Marathon. It's an amazing experience, right? This is back in 91, 92, 91. I won't tell those. The short version is I'm somewhere in my training for this that she's convinced me to do. And I just, want to finish. And we go up to the Catskills to a ski club that I, belong to. It was in the fall. We got up there super late. It was like, I think it was like 11:30, 12, whatever. And I hadn't run that day. And I went out for a run, and I come back and she looks at me and says, yeah, you're not a runner. Right. And it was this thing where I had this identity conversation that I'm a cyclist who's running. Right. But if I'm going to do a marathon, you do a marathon, you're a runner. So in that moment, I got that shift oh, yeah, wait, I am somebody who gets up, and goes out at midnight to run, 4 or 6 miles or whatever it was that I did. I guess I got to admit I'm a runner.
You're a runner now. That's right. I love that. It's a great story.
Okay, so let's talk a little more specifically about the types of properties you train people to invest in. What, obviously without only proprietary, but, what is there's a lot of players out there who claim, to have these great coaching programs for people in real estate, right? I know you've got a trademark 3 paydays, concept. I know that you already talked about the avatar, which is, again, different. Some of these places are really looking to work with these 25-year-olds, right? Who want to get into real estate and flip and houses or whatever. So talk a little bit about more specifically your program and the types of investments people make and what makes it different.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. Yeah, so we work with primarily either, like I said, the W-2 employee looking to create time and financial freedom, or even, I would say, a bigger group of people now is now the seasoned real estate investor that's getting burnt out from the current change in the market. So that's a huge difference in what we're doing right now. Well, where, right now, foreclosures are at a year-over-year high. REOs are a year-over-year high. You have properties sitting on the market now, year-over-year high. I think it's 60-some days now. You have relistings year-over-year high. You have all of these things that are happening. So the traditional mode of investing, which is go buy a property, add value, flip it, right? Or go buy a property, add value, refinance it. None of the numbers in most circumstances are working, right? So when I say 10 of the properties were penciling out before, maybe it's 2 that are penciling out. So now you have these investors that are looking for alternative strategies because they either need to make a decision. They either need to do more for less, right? So they got to do more flips to make less profit, which is more risky, or they need to stop doing it altogether. So instead, what we're showing people is, all right, you can take your current model, but instead of now selling it or flipping it, you now do a rent-to-own program. So now you can actually elevate the purchase price, because the market's not going to stay like this forever. So what we do is we elevate the value. We sell it to someone that can't qualify for a bank loan now, and then which allows us to maximize profits and honestly pull profits off the table day one. So no matter if they currently own real estate or they don't, really the big difference in I would say our unique selling proposition, right? Or really the model that we train people on, and especially coming in, is our 3 payday system. Because what it allows you to do is buy real estate deals creatively, right? So if we keep the seller in mind and we solve the seller's problem, it gets us creative deals that are profitable, right? By doing it on seller finance with the seller's the bank, or buying it subject to the existing loan and keeping debt in place, or controlling the property with a lease option. And then what that allows us to do is to get into deals with very little money and then sell it on rent to own, which allows an investor to get 3 income streams per deal. So you get non-refundable deposits up front, anywhere from 3 to 10% of an asking price. You get monthly cash flow, which is what most investors want. And you get a built-in buyer that's going to cash you out in the future, which is going to be equity. So it allows somebody to finally start getting leverage in their real estate business nowadays because they have these income streams coming in. So the average person can do real estate deals to increase their lifestyle without having to build and scale a business. Or the person that wants to grow and scale a real estate business can do so, and they'll actually have leverage within it because they're getting money up front, they're getting money monthly, and they have a future cash out. So if you look at any business model, quite frankly, if somebody was going to tell you you're going to get some profits today, you're going to get profits on a monthly basis, and then in the future you're also going to get another lump sum. Most people would say that's a pretty strong business model, whether it's in real estate or selling popsicles.
Love it. So I want to ask an elephant in the room question, because I know there's on the whole rent to own concept, right? There are huge advocates for it who say, listen, this is a phenomenal thing, because it takes folks who would never qualify for a loan, probably have near zero chance unless their circumstances significantly to ever own a place, and puts them in a position to potentially do that, right? The critics might say that, okay, they're paying money up front. A lot of these people are never going to ever get there, right? I just want to give you an opportunity to address that, because it's, as opposed to leaving that question open, because I know there are, camps. And listen, anything we do in business, somebody's going to criticize it. So let's address that one.
Well, quite honestly, I would criticize 99% of rent-to-owns as well, because they're not set up proper. That's the challenge. It's not that the concept is not good. Honestly, the concept is great. I mean, they're used in not only in real estate, rent-to-own or seller financing is in so many industries, right? At the end, some of it's preferred. That's how most people do the transaction. Financed. In the United States, everything is financed, which is pretty wild to say. And then real estate shouldn't be that way. But the truth is, it needs to be done correctly to ensure that you're giving the buyer the most amount of success or likelihood of success. They still need to do the program. So what separates us is that we do almost a quasi-underwriting at the beginning. So here's some important things. So we have a very specific funnel we bring people through, and we educate them, because in creative financing, just like on the seller side, the buyer side is just as much education as is real estate investing, because most people don't know that these strategies exist. So now they have a skeptical mind. So now we have to educate them to say, there's other options out there, right? The bank is not the only option, which who educates the greater public, right? Is the banks. So what we then do is we bring them through this education funnel, and then we walk them through a couple steps, which helps them develop the biggest amount of down payment they can give us, which is credited towards the purchase price. This is important because it's not an auction fee. It's not just you can lock in a price. It's credited towards the purchase price. So buyers are open to the process of continuously paying us, because it's almost like a forced savings. Because for a tenant that's becoming a buyer or a tenant buyer, they're tenants for a reason. For most circumstances, it's because they act like, they behave like, and they think like a tenant. And some people go through situations, don't get me wrong, but we need to then transition their behaviors. We need to help you save. We need to ensure that you're improving the property. We need to make sure you're working on your credit and paying your bills and not increasing your debt. Or if you're self-employed, we need to make sure that you're actually showing a certain amount of money every single month, instead of trying to, put it all right off. So we need to educate them. So we help them in the front end with a down payment. We always try to get it as close to 10% as possible, upfront and over time, because that's what the banks want to see. It's almost like a delayed cash sale. We're trying to do everything with the sale eventually being in the end. Then next, we connect them with a third party. So the third party knows their down payment plan, they know the purchase price, they know the rent payment, and then they're going to do the background check, credit check, verification of income. They're going to know their projected debt to income ratio on the front end, where they currently are today, and the back end.
Yeah.
So they know, so it's never a standpoint where it's you place them in a property that you didn't think could actually qualify. No, there's 150 pages of information that says, this person agreed to these terms. They believed that based on their debt to income ratio, they had a plan that they could execute on. And in the future, based upon today's current interest rates, they had a debt to income ratio. So that way they could know, okay, well, this is something that I could execute on to become mortgage ready. So we almost do a quasi underwriting at the beginning, because as an investor, I want them to be successful, because the last thing I want is the property back.
Right.
And if you follow our model is very heavy front end and then passive on the back end. So we want to just keep buying more real estate deals and placing good buyers in, and just let the deals stack up. So the last thing I want is go back and evaluate a deal I had 3 years ago. That's the difference between us and other people. There's people that will literally get on this podcast and say, well, let's just collect the non-refundable deposit and hope they default, and I'll just go do it again. Well, for us, I mean, morally and ethically, it's not right. Legally, it might be okay, based on their paperwork, but we truly want to see success. And I'm one of those living, breathing successes because I actually bought my first home on a red zone using this strategy.
Love it.
In Portsmouth, Rhode Island. So I understand like the acquisition side. I understand what a buyer goes through as well. So we really create a system to ensure their success. And that's a big component in our community. And that is like, our investors don't have defaults on these properties, right? They understand the integrity of a transaction, which is one of our core values, versus, unfortunately, some of these larger communities out there, even doing some of the same strategies ours, are defaulting on these contracts with their sellers at a pretty high level. And that mindset is what keeps our business going. I think we could honestly have scaled significantly larger if we were willing to completely eliminate the oversight of transactions. But we knew that we needed more coaches to do it, so we wanted to keep the integrity of the business. And honestly, that's also what's led us to, start acquiring real estate coaching companies too, because we knew that there was a certain group of coaches out there, or elite educators, that cared about the integrity of their students doing deals.
Yes.
And there's ones that didn't. And some of them are smaller as far as followings and things like that. But we wanted to truly lock arms with and do a really cool roll up around all of the other coaches out there, at least a select group that believed in what we believe, so that way we could impact the industry, so that way there was more success. Versus, I hear these calls every single day with our our onboarding teams, which is people who spent $5, $10, $25, $30, $50, $70, $100,000 in programs that didn't get them success. And yes, some of it's on them, but some of it's also on the programs willing to be really good salesmen, but not execution. And then that leads to the real estate transactions are not being executed properly, which then starts to affect communities and the end user, which is not what you want, because then that leads a huge effect on us as real estate investors, which we are at heart.
Yeah, I love that. Let's talk about this roll-up strategy a little bit before we come to the end here. Because obviously real estate investment you've done yourself and through the company deals, the training people that do real estate deals, the rev share, model is a deal. And now you're doing this additional, growth strategy for your company, which is acquisitions and roll-up. What had you, decide to go that route, and who are you targeting there? I mean, the interesting part with these kind of things is always sort of like, okay, got to make sure when you bring people in that there's alignment. You have to convince somebody who is, and I don't know if it's like coaches who are working, those are their systems, or if they own their own, like if they're entrepreneurs themselves, if they're entrepreneurs, you got to convince them that hey, they got to give up being kings or queens and come into your system, whatever. So talk to us a little bit about that journey and that decision and who you're looking at.
I love that. So it's an interesting thing. So my father-in-law is, he's like 20 something years older than me, probably 30 something years older than me at this point. And he's towards the end of his career, right? So, and I'm at I would say, I'm not at the beginning, but pretty much at the beginning. And about a couple of years ago, we were making a decision on selling Smart Real Estate Coach. Like, his father worked until he was like 80 something years old, and he was extremely successful, but that's not what he wanted out of life. So we started pursuing, we're actually on the market for about 2 years. We had some offers. We actually went almost through with a transaction, but there was a couple nuances of it that we didn't love. So we ended up backing out. And what I ended up saying, we regrouped after like 6 months. I said, Chris, I think there's an opportunity for us to go buy companies. And I said, we already have the skill sets for most of these strategies, like seller financing and all of these different techniques are a big component in acquisitions. And so I was like, oh, why don't we start pursuing this? So we had a conversation with a gentleman we're really good friends with. He has one of the largest M&A real estate coaching, or M&A coaching companies out there, has been involved in funds and roll-ups and acquisitions. So we brought this idea to him, and he said, you know what? I actually was going to attempt an idea like that, but we didn't have the team to go do it, and or the platform company to go do it. So what I realized is we had the platform company. We had Smart Real Estate Coach. So what we did is so we started pursuing it. So I started having some conversation with people. I said, look, we're trying to buy around 3 elite educators, maybe up to 5, that fit somewhere in the 300 to 2.5 million in EBITDA. Now, these are entrepreneurs that own their brands. And then once we acquire that, then we're going to go get some services, because we know we already have affiliate relationships with a lot of these services. And that way we can create that reoccurring revenue and honestly diversify our income stream. So it's not just coaching, And then we'll bring in some technology, which I'm having some really good conversations with some of my good friends that actually own like the CRMs and the things that make things tick. They said, so that's kind of the concept. But I said, but what's important to this is, well, we called it the integrity real estate role. I said, we're not just going to go buy real estate educators that have big followings. What we need to go buy people, and part of our roll-up transaction is like they're going to get a piece of the roll-up. So we get people all bought in.
Yes.
It said, we want to go find the right people because we want to impact the coaching. We want to impact the students in the real estate communities at a high level. So if we have 5 brands and it's not just Smart Real Estate Coach, well, now we can do that. So we're going after integrity-based people that actually do what they say they're going to do, are still active in their real estate journey as well. So that way they can handle when market transitions happen, they're educated and are actually getting students deals. So that was a big component of it. And then we started finding this other scenario, which I didn't really think at first, which was actually founders of real estate coaching companies have a really tough time exiting. They have a really tough time exiting because everything is built around this one face, right? The key man. And something that we did at Smart Real Estate Coach intentionally, but not as intensely, like we were able to transition from it just being my father-in-law's face to then it became me and my father-in-law's face. So then we had a community and now we have 6 coaches involved. So yeah, some of the YouTube and a lot like Chris still drives it, but it's not just based around one particular person.
Yes.
What we saw is, all right, so we have all these founders and then we started having more conversations with them and realized a couple of things. So one is fragmented industry. Like it's getting tougher for people to get good students because there's hundreds and hundreds of coaches now, right? Way more than when I exist. So this industry is built for disruption. There's huge fragmentation. Then you have founders that are getting burnt out and they don't know what to do because they don't have a clear exit plan. So when I started having conversations with them, they're like, I just want to go back to being the person on stage, the person coaching, right? The person inspiring and like in doing that. And I said, okay. So I was like, great. I actually want to do the opposite, but we're going to build a platform company, right? Our roll up, our top co, and it's going to come in, it's going to handle operations, marketing, sales, finance. And then we're going to have you be the brand for A, you're the brand for B, C, D. And what we're noticing is people are extremely excited, like getting back to what they wanted to do. So now as we acquire and have these LOIs out there and go under contract, what we're doing is we're really building the platform right now, ensuring the operations are correct, and then driving those sales to build. And we want to keep the brands intact because they work so hard to get these brands to have this trust, which is a whole nother thing in coaching. I mean, that's why most people have challenges because the trust factor is gone. Yeah. Because anybody that's really good at selling on Instagram or YouTube or whatever is getting people to pay and are not getting results. So we want to align with the right people there. And as we build out this roll up, we're going to continue to grow it with the end result being that all of the founders have a plan to transition while doing what they want to do. So that way they can eventually have an exit. And then they're going to get a piece up front, typically, or if it's a creative deal, and then they're going to get a piece of Topco. So that way they're all bought in because we want everybody on the same plane, everybody rowing in the same direction. And then we're going to build that up. Goal is to hit 100 million in EBITDA or 100 million in as an exit, 10 million in EBITDA, 10 to 12 million in EBITDA in the next 3 to 5 years. And then we finally are solving so many problems. We're solving the students' problem. We're solving the founders' problem and really making an impact on the industry.
Love that. All right. Listen, we could speak for hours, but we are even past our usual time, which is great. It's just too much good information, and people know that I just let it flow. But I do want to give you an opportunity before I ask the final 2 questions that I always ask on the podcast. And I know it's a broad question, but is there anything, whether it's about your company, whether it's about trends in real estate on where things are going, whether it's about is there anything that you're burning to bring up that's something you want to highlight or that's something that you see that might be interesting to the audience? And then we'll go to close this out.
I would say the biggest thing, I mean, if I'm just looking at a real estate perspective, and that is today's current market, like creative finance, you couldn't have picked a better time to hear this podcast right now. The amount of real estate transactions that are happening in the creative space are enormous. And there's a reason because the traditional market just isn't given any solutions. And we don't see it actually happening anytime soon. Yeah. Everybody's being promised that interest rates are going to go down, but affordability on housing continues to go up. And the amount of people out there that can qualify for bank loans is still going down because we're at an all-time high of people with debt. So it's just we need good real estate transactors out there that know these types of strategies to impact the market. So I'd say that would be huge. And then of course, like just shameless show, if anybody's listening to this and you have that type of business that we're looking to buy, I would love to have a conversation with you. Is it okay if I give away my email?
Yeah, that was actually going to be my next question is how do people connect with you?
Love it. I'm ahead of you, Corey. Just zach@smartrealestatecoach.com would be the best way to connect. You can just email me directly. Me or my EU will get a hold of it. So just zach@smartrealestatecoach.com.
All right. And folks, obviously, if you're driving or anything, that'll be in the show notes, so you can check that out. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, we're recording this on July 31st. It probably won't air till maybe even September. But the Fed, the latest Fed, they held interest rates firm, and the three dissenters were the ones who wanted to raise interest rates, not lower them. So, yeah, I mean, you never know what's going to happen in the future, but it certainly does not look like interest rates coming down anytime soon. So,
Nope.
Yeah, that's for sure. My final question on the podcast, Zach, is always about my highest value in life, which is freedom. And for me, that means everything from freedom around the world for people from oppression to why I've been an entrepreneur for decades and haven't had a boss. What does freedom mean to you, and how does it impact your life and business?
Yeah, I would say that's been a big driver for me. I think it's come in a couple different forms and even different words, but I think at the end of the day, that's a huge driver for me, because freedom to me just means that, like, you can say yes to the things you want to say yes to and say no to the things you want to say no to. And unfortunately, there's certain parts of my life, in certain seasons of my life, where that's not always accurate, right? You got to say yes to things you don't necessarily want to do. You got to get on planes to places that you might not want to go to. But the ultimate goal and identity that I would certainly like to have is to be free, right? And that could mean that I have a certain amount of money, right? Where I always tell people I want to be as successful as possible without impacting my relationship with my family. Like, that's not where I draw the line. So if that's $10 million, if that's $100 million, that's $1 billion, whatever it is, that's how successful I'd like to be. So I think, like, when you add that line of you could say yes to whatever you want and no to whatever you want, and even more importantly, you have the great relationships with the people that you care about, that's freedom to me.
Love it. Zach Beach, thanks for being such a great guest on the DealQuest podcast.
Thank you, Corey.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of DealQuest, where we help you understand how deal-driven growth can be your ticket to freedom. If you are interested in finding out more about my law firm, the services we provide to entrepreneurial and growing companies across industries all over the country, and my partner Brian Megan and I, and my amazing team, just head over to kupferlaw.com. That's kupferlaw.com. And if you want to follow more of my content, head over to my LinkedIn page where I post regularly. I'm Corey Kupfer. Until next week, wishing you the freedom and financial prosperity that I know your DealQuest will bring.